This video is brought to you by Nebula. If you want to watch an extended cut of the video with longer music clips that let the guitar solos breathe, you can head on over to Nebula with the link in the description. 30 years after Jimi Hendrix kicked off the golden age of the guitar solo, more than 200,000 people made the journey to upstate New York in hopes of recapturing that magic. Woodstock 99 was the second attempted revival of Woodstock, after a similar festival in 94 to commemorate the 25th anniversary. This time the festival sprawled across an abandoned Air Force base and drew the most celebrated names from across rap, rock, and metal. At 9:30 p.m. on the second night, the most innovative guitarist of the time played the best set of the entire festival. Tom Morello and Rage Against the Machine brought their heavy brand of rap metal for a 90-minute set that culminated in the anthemic Killing in the Name. After Morello capped the song off with his patented, effects-heavy solo style, Rage burned an American flag on stage behind him. It was the latest in a long lineage of guitar-centered protest, and the sort of thing the world had come to expect from Rage Against the Machine. But that flag burning was one of very few highlights from an event that would ultimately go down as one of the great disasters of music history. Rather than being a festival of peace and love, Woodstock 99 was a catastrophe of violence, sexual assault, and corporate exploitation. In the book Louder Than Hell, Morello himself called it the low point of nu metal. The rapes in the pit, the trashing of the sights, it just seemed like it distilled the worst elements of metal, the misogynist jock buggery, and the message wasn't announced as "this is a horrible thing." It was more like, "this is our new Woodstock generation. Bunch of idiots." The failures of Woodstock 99 highlighted a trend that had been ongoing since the early 90s. The old spirit of rock and roll was dying. Once the epitome of musical brilliance and innovation, the electric guitar solo had grown stale and trite after a half-century of dominance. While there were still brilliant guitarists playing through the 90s and early 2000s, the era would ultimately spell the end of the guitar solo's glorious reign. The grunge scene that erupted out of Seattle in the early 90s in response to the indulgences of hard rock began an era of guitar decline. But the guitarists responsible had no intention of killing their own art form. In fact, many of the greatest guitarists of the 90s came out of that grunge scene. Jerry Cantrell's screaming wail on Man in the Box takes many of the best aspects of metal and blues solos and strips them down to create something intense and raw. Kim Thayil used thick fuzz to create a heady psychedelic noise that comes through on a song like Pretty Noose. Even Kurt Cobain, who often gets a bad rap as a guitar player, was able to inject heart into his solos through sheer noise. The most technical guitarist of the grunge movement was probably the Smashing Pumpkins' Billy Corgan, who attributes his influence to prog greats like Ritchie Blackmore and Rush's Alex Lifeson. In an interview with Rick Beato, Corgan even admitted his guitar on Cherub Rock was lifted straight from Rush. Corgan told Beato that he viewed Kurt Cobain's solos as more ironic, whereas he was trying to imitate the guitar greats of old. Corgan's approach separated him from his grunge peers, but both sides of the argument shared something in common. Neither were truly innovative, at least not in the way that the great guitarists of the 70s had. With less new space to explore, rock and metal began to fracture out into an ever-increasing number of subgenres. In metal, the purveyors of these subgenres were working on refining the techniques that had been innovated in the 80s. Metal became a non-stop drive to show who could play cleanest, hardest, and fastest. Megadeth set a high bar for this drive at the start of the decade with Hangar 18, a song that features Dave Mustaine and Marty Friedman trading off superhuman shredding solos. One of the best players to come out of this era of refinement was Pantera's Dimebag Darrell, who originally came from a background of glam rock. He rose to stardom by perfecting the technical elements of Eddie Van Halen's style, while adding a smooth and undeniable rhythm groove. His playing on Walk will be forever enshrined in the halls of heavy metal history. The most technical movement of 90s guitar came in progressive metal, which built on the virtuosic playing of 70s greats like Robert Fripp and Steve Hackett. At the forefront of this progressive metal music was Dream Theater's John Petrucci, who debuted his astounding playing to the world on 1991's Under a Glass Moon. To this day, extreme metals have continued the legacy of guitar excellence. The guitar solo remains a cornerstone of 1,000 different subgenres, and new metal guitarists push the limit of technicality with each passing generation. But this drive for speed and refinement alienated a mainstream that had once embraced metal. As metal guitarists advanced their techniques to the point of accomplishing nearly impossible feats, the broader musical culture turned away. By the mid-90s, there was a new music starting to dominate the mainstream that had almost no guitarists, and often didn't use instrumentalists at all: hip-hop. The golden age of hip-hop saw it dethrone rock as the coolest music on the scene, but there were some who envisioned both worlds colliding. In 1991, Anthrax teamed up with Public Enemy for a cover of Bring the Noise, featuring a short but sweet solo by Scott Ian. Beastie Boys and their producer Rick Rubin brought rap and rock together on Sabotage, a song that features a simple but effective guitar solo. Ironically, as hip-hop was pushing a stale rock scene out to the sidelines, the new millennium saw some hip-hop minds try to freshen up their scene with rock. Outkast's 2000 hit, Bombs Over Baghdad, featured a psychedelic guitar solo reminiscent of Hendrix. The undisputed champions of rap rock were Rage Against the Machine. Rage's sound combined hip-hop grooves with heavy metal and relentless punk energy. It was all tied together by Tom Morello, who had a singular vision for what a guitar could be. Morello viewed the guitar as more than just a pick and strings, but rather as a blank canvas that he could use to create any sound he wanted. Speaking with the Chicago Tribune, he explained his approach. With guitar, I'd always mixed more sounds that occur in hip-hop, or occur on Crystal Method records, or occur at the zoo. So I've never been sort of tethered or have limited myself to the traditional rock and roll vocabulary. Morello is a constant tinkerer, experimenting with pedal boards and different strumming techniques to create his unique sounds. On the solo for Bullet in the Head, Morello goes ham on the toggle switch, producing a strange, off-kilter warbling. As Rage's career went on, Morello only became more experimental. The robotic solo on 1994's Mic Check is one of the strangest in rock history. Tom Morello was a leader in one of the only movements that saw true innovation in the 90s, alternative rock. But alt rock wasn't a movement with any sort of aesthetic cohesion. It was, in its very name, defined by being alternative to the mainstream of rock. So alt rock took up myriad different sounds. One of the most successful alt-rock bands of the era found their sound by combining LA's hardcore punk music with George Clinton's cosmic funk. After the tragic death of their original guitarist Hillel Slovak, the Red Hot Chili Peppers teamed up with a gifted young player named John Frusciante. Frusciante announced his presence as one of the hottest guitarists on the scene with his torrid solo on 1991's Suck My Kiss. As the decade went on and the Chili's struggled with fame and addiction, their sound mellowed out into an easier listening mainstream rock. This new style let Frusciante's incredible melodicism flourish. His airy solo on Scar Tissue made the song a radio rock staple to this day. While American groups like Rage and the Chili Peppers were pulling from metal and funk, the British alt-rock scenes drew heavily on electronic music. Portishead created a chill, downbeat sound by layering smooth guitar over hip-hop beats. Guitarist Adrian Utley paints a smoky, film noir picture with thick distortion on Glory Box. British acts of the 90s thrived on a dreary moodiness born out of cloudy skies and a quintessentially British malaise. Nobody captured this cold detachment better than Radiohead. Their landmark 1997 album OK Computer explored the alienation brought on by the oncoming digital age. Its third single, Paranoid Android, played with a complex, progressive structure that drew comparisons to Bohemian Rhapsody. And just like Bohemian Rhapsody, one of the highlights of Paranoid Android is a riveting solo. Johnny Greenwood uses an array of pedal effects to create a strange, screeching sound palette that almost seems to imitate the harsh noise of a dial-up modem. Greenwood was one of the few truly innovative guitarists of the 90s, but by the new millennium, even he and Radiohead were turning away from guitar-based rock, finding more ripe territory to experiment with in ambient electronic soundscapes. The alt-rockers of the 90s proved that they could write great guitar solos, but for most of them, the solo was a bonus feature, not a center point. Solos were fair game if they fit the song, but they were no longer the main attraction as they had been in the 70s and 80s. Of course, the guitar greats of yesteryear didn't just disappear in the 90s. Many legacy acts were still shining, albeit under less of a spotlight. In 1991, Brian May poured all of the complicated and pained emotion of Freddie Mercury's imminent death into a brief but astounding solo on The Show Must Go On. David Gilmour cut his own beautiful, emotive solo on 1994's High Hopes. In 1999, Carlos Santana scored an enormous hit with Rob Thomas on Smooth. Teaming up with Rob Thomas was a far cry from playing Woodstock on acid, but Carlos Santana's solo on Smooth proved that he hadn't faded with age. unexpected legacy act seized the spotlight in 2004 at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony. During a tribute to the late guitar legend George Harrison, none other than Prince stepped on stage clad in a bright red fedora and broke out one of the most impressive solos of the new millennium. Prince's solo on While My Guitar Gently Weeps is, by any measure, a triumph. But the fact that an 80s pop artist doing a solo at a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction was one of the most celebrated of the era is a clear sign of the medium's popular decline by the early 2000s. As rock's mainstream viability was waning, one final act picked up the torches of the great guitarists of old and established himself as the last true guitar star. Jack White was an eccentric musician who came out of the Detroit underground with an approach that was equal parts Muddy Waters and Johnny Ramone. He had a minimalist vision and understood that the limitations of simple chord structures paradoxically allowed for unprecedented creative liberation. Though he never had any designs at stardom, White's crunchy punk blues captured an audience who were desperate for rock stars. The White Stripes' 2001 album, White Blood Cells, unexpectedly broke them into the mainstream, and 2 years later, they followed it up with the greatest guitar album of the new millennium, Elephant. The best solos on Elephant can be found on Ball and Biscuit, an open blues jam that lets Jack White squeal to his heart's content. But the most lasting solo on Elephant doesn't feature extended blues. Instead, it takes a page out of the Smells Like Teen Spirit playbook and offers up a simple but powerful melodic idea. By embracing the raw, minimalist approach of Johnny Ramone and Kurt Cobain, Jack White was able to make the electric guitar cool again on Seven Nation Army. But this moment wouldn't last. Today's Seven Nation Army stands as perhaps the last true rock anthem, and one of the last solos to have a major impact on the broader music culture. Over the rest of the 2000s and 2010s, guitarists would work in their own niche scenes, but the guitar solo had disappeared almost entirely from the popular consciousness. But the vast majority of music being made isn't popular. While guitar solos may be gracing radio airwaves less than they once were, underground guitar scenes are beginning to thrive once more. In fact, some of the greatest guitarists ever to live are cutting music today, and slowly, the foundations for a rebirth of the guitar solo may just be happening right now, under our very noses. If you're enjoying this series but you wish there was more of it, you should check out Nebula. Every episode of this series on Nebula features extended music clips so you can really marinate in these unreal guitar solos. And until the end of the month, Nebula is once again offering lifetime memberships for $300. That means for a one-time payment, you can watch Nebula for the rest of your life, and you can also play a crucial role in helping us fund and develop new and exciting original content. That means you can be a part of creating experimental projects like my Polyphonic magazine, where I used Nebula as a platform to interview smaller artists that I wouldn't be able to talk about on YouTube. You can also support incredible resources like Real Life Lore's ongoing Modern Conflict series, or Broey Deschanel's new original, Taboo on Screen. And there's tons more amazing reasons to check out Nebula. If you sign up with the link in the description, you'll be able to watch all my videos early and ad-free, you'll have access to my class teaching how to analyze music, and you'll be supporting independent, creator-driven content. If you follow that link, you can sign up for lifetime, or you can also get 40% off an annual plan. That means you can get all of these features for a little over $250 a month. And if you think all of that sounds like something someone in your life might love, you can even gift Nebula memberships this holiday season. So check it all out with the link in the description. Nebula is a really incredible service that I genuinely believe in, and if you already support it, I can't thank you enough.